He is the 27-year-old Democratic mayor of Stockton, California. Please welcome His Honor, Michael Tubbs. Your Honor. How you doing, Michael? Great to meet you. How are you? So you are America's youngest mayor of a city over 100,000, is that right?
I tried to grow the beard so I looked a little bit older, but it's true.
And how's that going? Now, Stockton, California is where, roughly? Near Sacramento?
It's between Sacramento and San Francisco. It's the 12th largest city in the state, about 300,000 people.
300,000 people?
323,000 people.
You're in charge of that?
With other people helping, for sure.
Yes, of course. And what's, I mean, I'm not familiar with the area that much. Is it a conservative area? Is it a...
It's actually a real mix. The Christian Science Monitor wrote an article about how, in these partisan times, Stockton seems to be figuring it out. So about 40% of the population actually voted for the president, and 60% didn't. And the city's also incredibly diverse, so we're about 40% Latino, 20% Asian, 12% African American. So we have a microcosm of the country in terms of race, but also in terms of political ideologies, which makes governing very interesting. We have to have very
and you're doing some interesting things in government. I mean, you'd have something called Universal Basic Income that you, it's a pilot program, right? UBI, they call it, but it's basically, it's a fancy way of saying we're going to give some people free money.
But what's interesting...
How's that working out? Do they like free money?
Well, in the studies done in Alaska, which has a permanent dividend fund, and with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, of course, people are saying this is a good thing. But what's been interesting is doing the research and finding out that this program, this idea is as old as this nation itself, that Thomas Paine was calling for this in the Agrarian Revolution. Dr. King was speaking about this before he was assassinated.
And this is in place of social programs, like instead of food stamps and stuff like that, you're going to get just money?
In my mind, I think we need to enhance the social safety net. I think right now with the programs we have, it helps stabilize some people, but people are still struggling. I think the misnomer here is that it's rewarding people for being slothful. But
I would imagine some would take advantage.
But the majority of poor people are working. That's why we have that term.
Right. No, we have to do something. I'm just my job to question.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, Joe Biden talks about how the fact that it's not just having a job economically, it's dignity. It's having something to do all day. What do people do if they don't have jobs? And that really is the crux of what we're going to have to deal with in this country, right? Is that robots are taking all the jobs, automation. You know, there's just not going to be enough jobs for the people.
Well, I think yes, both. So on the idea of dignity of work, my mom's one of the most dignified people I know, and she was single, and she worked extremely hard. And I don't think there's anything inherently dignified of working 14 hours a day and still being stressed and having anxiety.
Right, but there's got to be somewhere in between that and sitting around watching card sharks, you know.
But to your point, I think with the current, when 1 in 2 Americans today can afford one $500 emergency, imagine what happens when there is automation and people are displaced. So we're piloting this in Stockton because we're saying that right now we have to talk about the economic system while also preparing folks for the jobs that don't exist yet.
And you also want to, as long as you're passing out money.
I'm trying to get some of yours before I leave.
Well, it's happened before. I was very scared about Mitt Romney. It doesn't look too good now. But no, you also have a program, I think, where you would give a stipend, right, to the people you identify as the most likely to commit murders in the city. So that they are induced not to do that. And there is precedent for that. We did that in Iraq. We bribed the Sunnis during the Iraq War. Don't shoot us, shoot them. And it worked. People like money.
I resent being compared to Stockton being compared to Iraq, but I would say the program...
No, I'm just comparing it to a program that worked.
But the program is interesting because it's not just giving money, but the money happens after 6 months of intensive case management. The program is called Advanced Peace, and it's based off the Office of Neighborhood Safety Enrichment. So Sacramento is running the program as well. We're starting this summer, and 40 other cities are looking at doing it because the idea is that we're paying $400,000 a year as cities for every homicide and every shooting, not even measuring the amount of trauma.
But you can identify who the most likely people, you know who the bad people are, the bad guys who are committing the crimes, and they tend not to if they have a stipend?
Well, the stipend's a part. So it's a stipend, but it's also intensive case management. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, so helping deal with trauma. It's transformative travel, but it's really the crux is the relationship. And 7 days a week communication and also life mapping. So sitting down with your coach and figuring out how do I go from A to B. And also the stipends after 6 months, and it's a fellowship. So you don't just get it. That actually comes with strings. You have to do things for it. So it's almost like a job.
Can you get the stipend money and the free money? Can I move that? No, I'm just kidding. So what is your biggest problem there in your city? Because we see cities, you know, we've had mayors on this show before, and they seem to be the ones who, they're closest to real problems. They're not like the people in Washington who can not do anything. They have to deal with stuff. What do you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the biggest issue in Stockton is poverty. 23% of our population is in poverty, but I would argue another 25% are at least one paycheck away. And with poverty, you see things like violence and educational attainment. And in California, with housing costs rising and wages not, we have folks who aren't able to afford housing. So we're taking a long and short-term approach. On the long term, we just launched a program called the Stockton Scholars, which would make CSU tuition free for the vast majority of students in our largest public school system.
Here's an issue for you, for any Democrat. Why don't Democrats run on repealing the Trump tax cut, which is $1.5 trillion, mostly to the rich? You could easily afford college for every person in the country for that.
100%. Let's do it.
Sold, huh?